a message they have to share to do well. Which one of you two want to go first? The first speaker is Dave.
Go, Dave.
Hi, family. My name is David Amnatick.
Hey, Dave.
Where's my hat? Well, about an hour ago, I just started to thinking about this. Sometimes I really prepare a lot for speaking, and sometimes I don't. Today I didn't. It's kind of like the weather thing. But what I did do was, just went for a walk with somebody and just talked. Kind of sponsorship was what we went off to talk about, just to kind of get me grounded. And we talked a lot about, some of the stuff that is good to talk about in the sponsorship workshop. But we also talked about stuff that we'd been through that we weren't in each other's lives for, stuff where we were in each other's lives for. And it was the therapeutic value of one addict helping another, And I don't know, I'm going to cover some of the basics, and I'm going to cover some of my personal experience. I'm going to cover some of the stuff that goes a bit beyond the basics for me. But that part of it, one addict helping another, that's at the heart of it. In that way, besides the title of the formal relationship, the sponsorship, you're all my sponsors, in a lot of ways. And carrying that with me into a sponsorship relationship really helps. That's just another addict. One of the things that can really trip me up in sponsorship is my expectations. That's one of the things we talked about, was how, as soon as you slap that title on somebody, it's so easy to, look at, ways that we're not living up to our own expectations, what it's good is to be a good sponsee. It's so easy to feel let down. It's so, and I feel like our sponsor isn't available. It's so easy to get all these expectations on there that and make it harder to appreciate how things are. It's looking at more at what things aren't. I don't know about, you guys. Yes, I do know about you guys. I know about myself, and that's why I know about you guys. And I know about you guys, and that's why I know about myself. Funny how that works. But when I feel disappointed in myself, or when I feel disappointed in somebody else, my natural knee-jerk reaction isn't to go, okay, what can we do different? What's the first most basic, simple thing to do to make it look, in the go in the direction I want it to be in? I just go, it ain't perfect. Fuck it. I don't think that really, but if you look back on my yesterday and last week and the week before, and you see what that I did less instead of more, that's why one of the things for me for keeping it fresh is to keep my expectations simple, minimal, realistic. Should back up, actually. I'll revisit this. Put a bookmark under simple, reasonable, and realistic. Let's start off with, does anybody have a sponsorship pamphlet? I couldn't find one before this. Okay, note to the next committee for next year. We need a lit rack. It is a NA function for carrying the message. Sometimes we forget that when it comes time to make T-shirts and banners. All the things that make it look pretty. We got all the icing at this convention. We left out a little bit of the meat. There's a lot of meat here, but we left out the literature. Anybody who wants to know about sponsorship who has no idea what the heck that means, we have a rich amount of literature written by addicts for addicts. Great place to start. I did not start there. I started with wondering what the hell a sponsor was, hearing about it, having preconceived ideas, that I got in treatment, that I got watching movies, and that I got from the main people I was sharing with at that time in my life. Other newcomers who were just as lost and clueless as me. We had a lot of mixed ideas. The sponsorship pamphlet basically hits on a few questions and pretty much opens up more questions. One of the questions is, what is a sponsor? Basically, the sponsor is somebody who has experience living the program and who shares that experience. There can be a lot of other things in that relationship. One of the things I look for is somebody who has done some kind of studying the steps with a sponsor, either writing about it. The structured step work can involve just like reading the step in one of our pieces of literature, and then writing about it, and then sharing what you wrote with your sponsor. For me, it also can involve friendship. The sponsorship pamphlet points out that it doesn't have to be friendship. Some of the people I've had as a sponsor, I never really got that close to as a friend, but they held me when I cried. They were there for me in ways that weren't necessarily part of the contract. Let's just put it at that. I've had way complicated criterion in my life for to ask somebody to be my sponsor. They had to meet, gobs and gobs of clean time. They had to be gurus. They had, I was looking for, somebody who's an expert, so I could feel comfortable and secure that I was getting the best. I didn't want to mess around, So what my basic, that provided me was an excuse not to do this thing at all. It gave me an excuse to not ask anybody because no one was good enough. And there's a lot of things I can understand that sponsorship can do. What I can tell you is when I don't have a sponsor, I feel a lack of direction in my life. I've gone through some long stretches where I was being picky, and I just felt that the purpose was getting lost in my recovery. The purpose was getting lost in getting up and going to work. It wasn't like major depression. It just was that there was a lack of a sense of direction in my life. Maybe because I wasn't getting direction. My sponsor's one source of guidance in my life. You guys provide it. The literature provides it. Consequences provide it. The sponsorship relationship in that is unique. It is part of a balanced recovery. Just going to meetings doesn't cut it for me. It's out of balance. Just sharing one-on-one on the telephone or over coffee doesn't cut it for me. Just being involved in service, getting elected into some position where I'm responsible for typing at meeting directories, whatever, that don't cut it. It's out of balance. And sponsorship can be too. I've been involved in sponsorship family network that we really did not share much with as far as real down and dirty, being real with each other outside of that sponsorship family. We went to meetings, we went and we shared with people, but it just wasn't the same thing. We kind of reserved that gut-wrenching stuff for each other, and that is does not go along with anonymity. That's being picky. That doesn't go along with any, the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using. That was, the only requirement was a desire to stop using and having, great-great-grand sponsor Bob, that got me out of touch with the program and the fellowship. Another way I've biffed sponsorship is really procrastinating on being active. Sponsorship is not a formal relationship where you just get married. It's an active relationship. If you need guidance in your life and you ask me to be your sponsor and you call me and I'm not there for you, I'm not being your sponsor. I might have that title, but it's an active relationship. If I'm not living up to it, when I haven't lived up to it, that relationship wasn't there. It was only the title. When as a sponsee, I haven't used my sponsor. My first sponsor, it was the guy I could point to across the room when somebody asked, "Who's your sponsor?" That's how I used them. That was about it. Honestly, I didn't know any better at the time. Had I used him more, he probably would have taught me that wasn't the way to use him. But at that time, there was a real tradition in sponsorship to be only responding as a sponsor, not to be proactive. You didn't call your sponsee; you waited for them to call you. Now things have grown a little bit. We've learned that's for the most part, I see that being a little too black and white for most people. I'll call my sponsees, and I have a sponsor today who calls me, and I'm really glad he does. There's all kinds of different styles. Some of them are really managing and drill sergeant, and really help manage your life, help make decisions for you. Others ask a lot of questions to help you, just figure things out. How do you pick somebody? How do you know what style's going to work for you? My experience is they're all good. Really, it's just that being without one sucks. There's the other thing, sponsorship pamphlet, as far as minimum requirement of clean time. I've seen people with 60 days sponsor somebody for 3 or 4 days who had only a few weeks and saw it work. Those 3-4 days, they were that person's sponsor. They guided them into what it took to find the next level of sponsorship that person needed. For that 3 or 4 days, they were a sponsor. So, again, to me, things aren't all that black and white anymore. Ideally, I want a sponsor who's got their feet firmly planted. Somebody with 60 days don't. But it's neat to see what that can do for somebody. Men with men, women with women, that's a big one. I've tried sponsoring women in my area where there were no women to ask. It didn't work. Why? It didn't. It doesn't matter why. I can come up with a lot of things that make sense, but most of this stuff, it's not a matter of what the reasons are that make sense. The only reason that matters is it our experience that that something works or not. That's the only thing that matters. You can say it's because, there's sexual attraction. You can say it's because, different genders have different issues. You can say it's because, we need to learn how to have some intimacy with the same gender, and you can say that, there are all kinds of things that make sense, but it's just our, pretty much our experience. I don't know any, I can't say many, I don't know any relationship where it's a man with a woman or a woman with a man. I've tried sponsoring gay people, and I know that there's different experiences with that. If that's an issue, the best I can say is ask around. It did not work when I was sponsoring gay men. Whether that's just because some people make it and some people don't, or whether it had something to do with their sexuality, I have no idea. I've asked around, should a gay person have a gay sponsor? Should if a gay man, is that where they should get a woman sponsor? There's no concrete answers that I've come across. But what I have learned is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are people with experiences with this. Ask, seek guidance with somebody who's had some, kicking in the dirt with this. Don't reinvent the wheel. Some people are real black and white that about men with men, women with women. As far as other differences, religious differences, racial differences, all those other things, I have had all kinds of sponsors. I've had all kinds of sponsees, and I've never really seen any of that stuff get in the way. It seems to me that when there are differences, then I can really see the similarities. It's like, I've got a sponsee who is very similar to me in many ways, and sometimes it's hard for us to tell what's just us and what's about recovery. I have sponsees who are very different from me, and there's not a lot of overlap, but because of our differences, that overlap really stands out. We can see the similarities and how the disease has made us suffer, regardless of whether they use the same things I used, as long as I used. So we don't have to find the exact person we want to be to follow. We don't need to find somebody who's exactly like us or different from us. I've seen intellectuals be with intellectuals. I've seen intellectuals have uneducated person for a sponsor. Put those $50 words away, son. It can work. Let's see, what else is in that sponsorship pamphlet? At one time, I thought about having somebody outside the program as a sponsor. They talked about it in treatment, about having like a priest as a sponsor, or somebody like in the family that I respected. There's all kinds of paths to recovery, but the program of Narcotics Anonymous, as I understand it, talks about having a sponsor in Narcotics Anonymous. Somebody who's with experience working the program of Narcotics Anonymous. And that's not dogma. That comes from me from looking around at people who have what I want, and they're working a program of Narcotics Anonymous. If that's not the case for somebody else, that's fine. What I want is what the people who are working in an NA program have. More than one sponsor. Again, different programs do different things. In NA, we pretty much have one sponsor. That's how I understand it. It's real easy to play mom off of dad. As far as how to use a sponsor, again, I could go talk more about how not to use one sometimes. Calling my sponsor on a regular basis, whether I feel like I need to or not. It's just like anything else. I don't know. I'm looking around the room. I'm seeing a lot of faces that I feel like should know this stuff. So I kind of want to skip ahead and over to more like being a sponsor. A lot of the stumbling blocks I've come up with in sponsorship. One is when somebody asks me to be their sponsor, and I spend 2 hours with them, and then I never see them again. I found a neat trick for weeding out on that. I have the assignment, read the sponsorship pamphlet and call me tomorrow. It's beautiful. It is so beautiful. It weeds out a lot of the people that aren't active. Another thing I do is I talk about even people who are real new, people who are still trying to decide whether or not they relate as an addict or not, people who aren't ready for the steps, they're ready for who is an addict. I talk to them about sponsorship being learning how to be a sponsor. Someday, if you can choose this way of life, you will be a sponsor. So you might want to write this stuff down so you'll be able to pull it out and remember what your experience was. You'll want to go through the motions. It's great. It's a great thing to say. You're learning how to be a sponsor, because what's really neat is it's not that I want them to write it down so they'll remember and be able to pull it out 3 years from now when they're taking somebody through. It's so they'll remember next week. Because something that gets really old is having a sponsor you call 2 days later and go, "What is it you told me to do?" So it's a nice little trick, I guess, to get them to train to be a sponsor. I had a lot of dogmatic ideas at one time that were real black and white about what I expected of a sponsee, what I expected of myself as a sponsee, and I'd use it to beat myself up and say, and feel like, shit, I haven't called him all week. Next thing I know, though, it's 3 weeks since I've called him. Or damn it, I still haven't written on this step work. So it's like, instead of using shame and looking at things as how they aren't and how they should be, what's the next best thing? There have been times when I've gotten together with my sponsee and sat them in a corner, gave them pen and paper, and let them do what they should have done on their own time. And it worked. It was the little extra support that they needed. It was that, I think you can do this. I believe in you. And here, let's have a little discipline and get it done. It wasn't, it wasn't something that, I was enabling them. I don't feel it was codependent. And there's been times when I found that was the time I put in doing my step work that I've been putting off. Another key trick I have is I like to be a little bit behind a sponsee or two in the steps. So when they do their step work, I got something to write on mine. I learned so much from my sponsees. Honestly, when it comes to the understanding and application that, this program, I get more from my sponsees than I do from my sponsor. That's one of the reasons also why I say I'm training you to be a sponsor. I used to do a lot of lecturing. My first sponsor, it was mostly me being quiet, and it was handed to me. I remember my head would just be exploding, it would just be swimming after half an hour, and he'd been doing this for a while, and his attention span was enormous. Where my brain still had a lot of teeth missing from the gears. And it didn't take long for me to just be exhausted. I couldn't absorb it all. I still feel like it's important to preach a little bit, the understanding, because where else is it going to come from, but I ask a lot of questions and I listen. I learn a lot from somebody else teaching me, and I learn from teaching others. When I'm doing the lecture and stuff, and their head's swimming, who do you think's getting a lot out of it? They're not. Their butterfly net at that point has holes this big in it. When I'm mostly talking to hear myself at that point, I learn a lot. So if I really want them to learn anything, I get them talking to me. And that's how they learn. Just knowing when to shut up and listen instead of being Mr. Guru on the mountain and thinking I know all my shit. Not only do they learn more that way, it's amazing. People do not work the program today the way they worked it when I was taught. I'd be dead today, I honestly believe. Jails, institutions, and death, or a new way to live. That keeps on happening. New, all the time. It is, as an old-timer, which you are when you say you are, sometimes I are, sometimes I aren't. As an old-timer, it's really easy to get stuck in ego. It's really easy to get stuck in reliving a past that never, ever really was. Some ideal recovery land of recovering giants that never, ever, ever existed, except in the bedtime stories that my sponsor used to tell me. And it is so easy to look at how things could be and how they aren't, instead of learning of how they are. And that ability to appreciate is what keeps my recovery fresh. My last sponsor and my current sponsor both had less time than me. It's a new way to live all the time. And my recovery can become stagnant. And I ain't alone in this. I said earlier, I don't know about you. Hell yeah, I know about you. There's a lot of old-timers who, for me, they're the people I have a chance to give it away from. That's what I'm wanting to talk to right now. Those who are stagnant and feeling stuck and who recovery isn't fresh for, go find somebody with half your clean time and humble yourself and open the door to some just wonderful fresh air and sunshine and a whole new way to do this. The principles are the same. The steps are the same. But the day-to-day activities, how we go about working the program, evolves. It's a program of change, and it keeps on growing. Either live in the past, that, again, it's an ideal past that never was, or get some fresh air in your life. Stop being the expert. I sponsor people with more time than me. And let me tell you, this ain't an ego trip. It's so refreshing to not have people above me and below me and always looking for somebody I can look up to and admire and looking for toadies to feed into my ego. That was a part of the street life. That was a part of wanting to be the big fish in the small pond. Today I'm really trying to be an ordinary addict, instead of an extraordinary addict. I'm trying to be an ordinary addict in an extraordinary program. I'm trying to help NA become more extraordinary, not David. And it's really neat, I've got that in my own life too. I'm learning how to dare to be average. It's nice. Each time I've gone without a sponsor because there wasn't one good enough, those were lonely times. And each time when I got sick and tired, I ended up asking somebody that was just, you'll do for now. It's not a marriage. My God, out in the street I was such a whore when anybody had something I wanted. And then I come in here and I get picky. I was the first one sitting next to you, if I thought you had something I wanted. And now all of a sudden it's just like, you're not good enough. You can tell what color my eyes are. I can't. I can spot your bullshit so easy, but I can't spot my own. I make a lousy sponsor for myself. Co-sponsorship, I've gone through that rationalization too. What happened with co-sponsorship was pretty soon we were, only takes two to make a meeting. kind of forgot about that regularly scheduled any addict is welcome thing. Threw that out the window too. That's what a meeting is. A meeting is a service provided by a group, and it's regularly scheduled, and any addict is welcome. A meeting is not two addicts, a cup of coffee, and a resentment. To me, that's just one addict helping another. That's a good thing, but it ain't a meeting, and co-sponsorship is, blurring the lines. My sponsor is my sponsor. I'm not his sponsor too. Now, in that, there's plenty of times when I have an opportunity to be that one addict helping another. Where I'm calling him on his shit. In that, there's times when I'm helping him get through issues. There is a definite two-way street to it, but he is my sponsor. I am his sponsee. Period. We're not just breathing the same stale air back and forth and co-signing each other's bullshit. I really didn't see it when I was in it, and people would call me on it, and I didn't understand it. But it was just another way I could protect my ego and not let the rest of this damn fellowship who's sinking into the mud take me down with it. It was another way for me to just be part of the, distance myself from the unity. Sponsorship ties me into the unity. Let's see. As far as some of the stuff that a sponsor ain't, again, I'll refer to the pamphlet. I've loaned sponsees money. Either give it to them or don't. I have. I've given relationship advice instead of sticking to my own experience. We're not counselors. I have professional training in helping people with health issues, with financial personal management, with communication skills, with basic life skills kind of stuff. Time to take that hat off when I put the sponsor hat on. I'll do it with you guys if you're not my sponsee. I won't with my sponsees. Just because it's too easy to start trying to manage their life for them instead of just be a guide. There are no pledges to sign. As my sponsee, you owe me nothing. If you're using me, you're using me. If you're not, you're not. You don't have to answer to me. I can't fire you. I didn't hire you. You hired me. I can't fire you. I used to think I was firing people. It was a big ego trip again. You hired me for the job. I can quit. And that's okay, actually, But I got to be honest with myself that I quit. I didn't fire somebody. I quit. There are times when, as a guide, I don't think it's working. And that's when I guide somebody to somebody else, or just to find somebody else. But I didn't fire you. You didn't let me down. It just didn't work. You can look at some of the things as what could do better next time, but you owe me nothing. If you screw up, it ain't my fault. If you do something right, I can't take credit for it. There are people who have asked me to be their sponsor who I did not think would work a program that I would be proud of. And it is hard sometimes to say yes to somebody who I feel is going to go out there dogging chicks, who's going to not be involved in service, or who's going to be involved in service in the worst way, and you have people go, that's David's sponsee. That shit's going to happen. But this is a program for those who want it, not those who need it. God decides who's going to be put into my life. It's not up to me to say yes or no based on who is asking me. It's up to me to say yes or no based on whether or not I'm available emotionally, if I'm available with enough time. Honestly, don't tell anybody else this, but I don't say no to anybody, even if the time is a factor, because very few people actually take up that much of my time. It is an honor when they do. At the same time, even though I can't take credit, I can't help but be proud of some of the people that have been in my life, and proud of myself for being there for them. People who no one else would be there for. People who no one believed in. And I believe that this is the program for those who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. Anybody can get this thing. I have seen some really screwed up people come in here damaged, and who are some of the most productive members of society now. Any of us can get this thing. It's for those who want it, not those who we want to want it. It's not for those who need it. I can't pick and choose. That principle doesn't just hold true in sponsorship. As group member, I try and remember that too. There's some people in here that ain't pretty when they come in, and it's really easy to ignore them. It's so easy to focus on, those that are more glamorous, ones that seem groovy, ones that I think would really be a neat part of my life. It really sucks when, they say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, but it really sucks when there's somebody who's doing their half, they're meeting us halfway, and the waters they're getting are so murky and so little that the program let them down. That'll happen. We're only human. We got to be conscious of it. I try and be conscious of my going more to the groovy person. I was a loser when I got here, and NA would be really cool if it weren't for all the goddamn addicts. You guys taught me how to be this really groovy, awesome person I am today. You're the ones who gave me the social skills. You're the ones who called me on my shit when I was talking too loud and too long and rambling, overly excited and getting my heartbeat erasing. Because finally, for the first time in my life, I thought someone was actually listening to me, and I just glommed onto it like sucked them dry, man. You guys taught me boundaries. You guys taught me this stuff. If I want cool people in my life, I gotta give away what I got. To know that, where I got it, and that I ain't all that. If I want a cool program with cool people to be there for me like they were there for me, I gotta be there. I have no idea how much time I've talked. I have no idea what I meant to say. I have no idea what I've said. But I think it's time to give somebody else a chance.
And the next speaker is Bob.
Little Debbie there. Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks, little Debbie.
Sorry, Debbie. How long do we go here? 5:30?
Get open mics after you're done anyway.
Okay. I was intimidated actually when I saw David there. Or I found that David was on this list. I got to say, I've been involved in a sponsorship workshop with David before, and even in real life situations. I'm Bob. I'm Eric. Let me start off that way.
Hey, Bob.
I was going to say the intimidation part first. And I'm grateful to be here. I signed up for this on Friday night. Going up there just to sign up as a chairperson and somebody just to lead one. I thought, I'll do my selfless service. And the reason I signed up for this is not because of my strengths in sponsorship, but because of my weaknesses. And that's where I've learned, it seems, is through other people's experience, strength, and hope. And even though mine may be, I may have some negative areas in my time as a sponsor, I thought probably it'd be a good thing for me to talk about, for me, and then maybe somebody could get something from what I said. I found NA and found a sponsor on the same day, which is a little strange to say, I guess. I came to NA from a treatment center, and the treatment center told me to do two things. One, go to a meeting and introduce myself as a cross addict. Now, I'm not sure what a cross addict is, and I still don't understand the cross. I'm cross addicted, but I'm addicted to crosses. What is that? But I did that because at that point I was ready to listen. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I had quit lots of times, and I could quit, but I couldn't stay quit. And so I had to listen. I knew I had to listen to what somebody else had to say rather than what Bob had to say. And so I was ready to do that. And so they told me to go to a meeting, find a meeting. I went to a meeting over in South Bend, and I introduced myself as a cross addict. Of course, now we know everybody that introduced themselves as a cross addicted. They came fresh from the treatment center, so we know where I was from. And when I introduced myself, I did the second thing they told me to do, is to ask for a temporary sponsor. And that was a very good thing. Big ugly dude named Roger walked up to me after the meeting and he says, "Yeah, man, I'll be your sponsor." And he was my temporary sponsor there from the very first day that I walked into Narcotics Anonymous. Neat guy. Didn't use him much. I can't say I called him every day and all that. I mean, I still hung up on this whole idea that why would you help me? Why would anyone want to spend time helping me unless they wanted something from me? That concept took me a long time to I had to deal with that. Just because I've always been a using person. I've always used people. I mean, it didn't matter. I will be your friend, but I'm always looking at where I can take advantage of you. That's been my whole lifestyle, my entire life. And so when I came to Narcotics Anonymous, sitting around the tables and in that first meeting, they gave me this list of phone numbers. Yeah, great. All right, got these phone numbers, but now what's the price here? What are they going to? What's really going to happen if I take advantage of this situation? If I use somebody. So it wasn't until I passed out some phone numbers and got some phone calls in the middle of the night that I really understood that it wasn't the person making the call that it helps. It's the person receiving the call to be able to say, "Hey, I'm here for you," and that is the we part of this program, and that is so cool, that we can do together what we can't do alone. That concept alone gave me my life back, because I could never do it alone. Tried that, kept quitting. Did the treatment center thing. That actually, from that first time, I ended up going to 3 treatment centers. That was the first one. Had some clean time, stayed away from the drugs, but did the same old thing. I was still stealing. I was in the insurance business, still stealing from clients, doing a lot of the same thing. I just wasn't using drugs. And I had to learn, through this whole process of, getting a sponsor, using a sponsor, to learn some of the skills to not do the same old things that I was always doing, because it was always getting me back to the same things I did before. I got a permanent sponsor shortly after that first night. About 2 weeks. I used a temporary sponsor for a couple of weeks, and I got a sponsor. I didn't call him. Didn't really use that relationship too much. didn't really get it. My basic premise was to stay clean, not have to use, and I was able to do that. Actually, for a year, I stayed clean a year the first time. By the end of the first year, I was, doing all the negative things I was doing. I was always stealing, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and paying the bills and doing all these things. I hadn't really made any big changes in my life, other than I wasn't going to my dealer's house and wasn't making those trips that I had made before. But I learned something, even though it wasn't, what I'm trying to learn today, is learn how to deal with life, deal with life in life's terms. At that time, I got a lot of knowledge, even doing it the wrong way, and that's what I needed, because I was like a kid, it's just like a child. I was 38 years old, but I was just a kid, From the time after I relapsed, I celebrated a year, went on an airplane ride to Bahamas, went to play golf, a golf tournament, old Storyfield, but it's from North Central here, but relapsed at a little golf outing, and from a Bloody Mary on the airplane to back to my drug of choice. When I hit the ground, it was just a blur that weekend. Came back. Of course, I didn't want anything to do with my sponsor at that point, so kind of stayed clear of them, and went on from that point. Still had a meeting because I felt a lot of guilt. Every once in a while, I'd go in, stick my head in the door, but I'd still go use. Got clean again. Got through another treatment center. Went to a second treatment center. Relapsed that time again. Just kind of the in and out 30-day key tag thing. Although I never took the key tags because I didn't want anybody to know. That's none of your business. How many days clean I had. Finally, I got to and I don't understand the difference. I don't really know what happened the third time. I got someplace and got in treatment and got a different understanding. I came out of a treatment center in California, actually, thinking a different thing. I mean, having a different attitude about it all. Of course, I'd reached a new bottom, I'd faced death, faced a 9mm through the hotel room door. Thought it was over. Facing jail time, then by that time, ended up serving a couple of years, mostly work release, but served 2 years. And this program promised me that, jails, institutions, and death. And I faced death right in the eyes, and didn't want that. God is good, and God introduced me to this program, and that's why I can sit up here and tell you, He's given me 4.5 years of clean time today, and I'm just really thankful for that. Change sponsors. Had this new way of thinking about things, and so I thought I had to grab hold of somebody new. Actually, my old sponsor never did anything wrong. I just never called him. He was doing all the right things, but I went to a new sponsor that helped me. I mean, he did a lot of the right things in the beginning. Helped get me started and guiding me through some steps. Got into 4-step. It was the first time I'd ever been in a 4-step. Through all the earlier time, first, second, third, God, I know can take care of this. I'll give it over to you, and then I just left off from there. But after I got through my 4-step, I was just had a whole get rid of some of the crap. It gave me a better understanding of that I am headed somewhere positive. My dad died about a year ago, and I had to deal with some issues right prior to him dying, and I was able to get through those with my sponsor. And it was some good stuff. I really it was at a time, it was a God thing. It was at a time I just had to deal with some resentments and some problems that I had with my dad and the relationship he'd had with my mother when I was a child. And I was able to do that. It just, the timing was perfect, and didn't even know my dad was close to death. So, God took care of that situation too. I know we're not talking about the spiritual side of this, but that is where, through this program, God has just always been there at the right time. I've faded away from him. I've relapsed. I've done all these things, but when I came back, he was always there waiting for me. The open arms. Carrying me through the sand. The footprints in the sand thing. When I turned my back on him, he never turns back on me. He was just waiting for me to come back, and that's so neat. Now, as a sponsor, there's a whole nother ball game here. I was a guru sponsor. There we go, Sherry. Hey, can I get a picture? Can I get a copy of that? And here's where my real dilemma goes with this whole sponsor thing. This is why I signed up right here. I was king sponsor. I was going to a lot of meetings, and by going to a lot of meetings and sharing a lot, and working a real program, I really was working the steps and doing all the right things. And I think when we do that is when people ask us to be a sponsor. And at one time I had 10 or 11 sponsees. They weren't all seriously working the program, but they considered me their sponsor. And I asked my sponsor, how many sponsees is too many? Is my plate full? And he gave me an interesting answer. I'll go ahead and share that. He says, well, Jesus had 12 disciples. Was the answer there? And he guided those 12 disciples. And this was maybe outside of the program to say that word, but really the premise there was the idea that if I had 8 or 10 or 12 or whatever, that there'd only be half of those doing anything, and then again the half of that's really taking any of my time, that's calling, and it was the case. There were 2 or 3 people that I really was working anything with and doing any work with. So time-wise, that always worked out. But one time, about 6 months ago, I had 4 active sponsees, and I was big clouding, kind of right on top of things, king guy, I was really showing them, we weren't enough NA meetings, so we'd go hit some other fellowships, and, I was really out there doing the whole sponsor thing, and everybody relapsed. One guy went to jail, one guy went to treatment, one guy went to Texas, and when they're out, they're gone. Everybody was gone. And I had already dealt with some of these issues. In fact, David helped me deal with some things with one sponsee that where I just get so attached to these guys. They were more than my friend. They were like part of me. Okay, and if they relapsed, I'm falling out too. I'm not relapsing, but it's like part of me is going into this depression because I'm attached to them, and pity pot thing. Why? How could you do this to me and not really feeling like, how you do to yourself, and that was the area that I really learned in, was that I can't let that happen. That's not what a sponsor is, And I have been a banker, and I've been a taxi, and I have been a hotel, and I've always, and why wouldn't you be if they're your kids or your brothers, or and that was the way it worked. They were part of my life. Hey, dear, somebody's gonna move in with us. Is that okay? Yeah, if you think so, yeah, that's all right. So we're cooking their meals, and they're living there, and the whole works. So that's not what this program's all about. Let me tell you. Okay. Because it's sponsor. Because it doesn't work. So going from being on top of this whole sponsor thing to being right to the depths of despair happened in just a couple of weeks, and couldn't figure it out. Stopped going to meetings for a while. Didn't understand why God would let this happen. Okay. Talked to everybody. You can't keep them here. Show the prayer, all the little words. You can't carry the message. Can't carry the attic. all the helpful things, and it just wasn't really sticking to me. And I eventually it came around, and I, turned it all over to God, and things did get easier at that time. But I carried that for a long time, and it was, I look at that time, it was very harmful to my recovery, but in the long run, those valleys we go through are helpful to our recovery, and I feel like that, the steps have done a lot in my recovery, but dealing with the issues with sponsees probably has done more for me developing a closeness to God, because I have to, that's the only direction I can go, is to turn it over to God and say, I've taken this, and I'm sorry that I did, and now I give it back, is what I had to do. And I'm thankful that he was able to show me to do that. I've got a couple sponsees now that kind of get involved in some things, but just freshly involved. I'm going to try to do things differently. I'm learning, after getting beat up a little bit. That's my ears are more open. I'm listening to you, David. Cute joke, David and I were talking about. The guy that asked his sponsor if it's okay to date women in recovery, and the guy asked the sponsor, and she said, "Yeah, that's fine. Pick me up at 8 o'clock." So obviously, there's all the regular things that we don't do, but I'm trying to learn today the things that I can do right as a sponsor, and the things that I should be doing as a sponsee. And I'm trying to make this weekend kind of a new beginning for myself to start doing some things right. I've been on a 6-step for a year, and time to move on, do some things with those character defects, and spend a little more time writing on that and getting that stuff worked out and move on to step 7. So I appreciate this. I appreciate the opportunity to dump on you a little bit here. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Golf clap.
Before we open the floor for sharing, I need to remind everyone that you are being taped. If you wish not be taped, please let me know so we can shut the tape off. Anybody got anything?
Sure.
Victor Almatic.
Hey,
And thank you, Dave and Bob. And you hit on a lot of good points. And I can probably tell you how what not to do, about being a sponsee or a sponsor. I know, and I'm just going to share my experience. See, because when I first got in here to the rooms, and I didn't get my first sponsor till I had maybe 3 or 4 months clean, because I read the pamphlet and I asked people, and they said, find something that has something that you want. And a lot of it, I guess a lot of it back then for me, I knew, I knew that that I would have to find some sort of higher power. That's what I learned after about 4 months. So I was looking for somebody that was quite spiritual, and I found him, and he was very spiritual. I liked what he shared, and he helped me. So he became my sponsor, and he was involved in service, and I didn't use him a whole lot. Matter of fact, I hardly used him, and he was pretty slick. He'd bring up at meetings, so should you use your sponsor, or how to use your sponsor at the meetings I'm sitting in with him, and I just look at him and smile, and he smiled back, and I knew he was doing that for my benefit, You know, and I talked to him a little bit, and not as much as I'd like to, but as time went on, you know, I'd had him for about a year or two, and then he moved out of town, out west, you know. So I telling people I had a long distance sponsor now, you know. I still use him, you know, but you know, and I hadn't heard from him, and I haven't heard from him in quite a while. You know, and I've had 3 sponsors here, and that was my first one. See, and the second one, I'm gonna break his anonymity. His name is Victor, and I had to fire him. You know, because you know, he was a fool. You know, he was a fool. You know, and he was a very bad guy for me. You know, and so I had to fire him, and because I got to that point where I was stagnant. And I know some of you were there at Spirituality last year, and I talked about it. They had the sponsor family thing going, and I talked about it. And that day I got a sponsor. You know, and I think a lot of why I wanted, or I know I needed a sponsor, is that I was sort of isolating. You know, I mean, I still went to meetings and I still hung out, but I was isolating. You know, and I think it's more inside for me, and you know, and today see, the sponsor I had today was at my first meeting, and I hated the guy. You know, I mean, I thought he was obnoxious. I thought he was loud, and you know, and some of the bitch was always right. You know, but you know, we're real good friends today, and you know, and we have breakfast every Sunday if I don't see him through the week. You know, our work hours conflict a lot. He isn't here because he went out of town for the week, but you know, I try to use him to the best of my ability. I still don't know how to use a sponsor, you know, but I think I know that for me it's important to have some sort of communication with my sponsor, you know. And he's not real drill sergeant, you know. And when I ask him, what should I do, he'll say, what do you think? I said, you know, that's not the answer. I want the answer, please, you know. But you know, but that helps me realize that see, I have the answers. I do have the answers inside, and I'd be a lot. A sponsor to me is a lot about teaching me how to get them answers out, you know, and you know, and I'm grateful that I have one today. You know, and it's like, you know, the fool I had him for 7 years. You know, so I've been around here for a while. I had 7 years with the spot, you know, and I had to fire myself, you know. I mean, it just wasn't working, you know, and you know, and it's like getting to a new level of recovery for me, you know, and because this is nothing like, this is just like a PlayStation game, you know. Once I kill all them enemies, you know, I get to the next level and more enemies come out. You know, so, yeah. But,
I can relate to that.
you know, and I know that's just my experience, you know, and thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Victor.
Right on.
Victor. Would anybody else like to share? Oh, fine.
Go Sarah.
Go Sarah.
Okay. I'm Sarah, and I'm an addict.
I'm Sarah.
Hi. I'm also a daycare teacher. Sponsorship is something. Getting a sponsor took me a long, long time. I've been in this program for, actually, gosh, close to 4 years, except for a 3-day binge. And it took me until last year at this convention to get a sponsor. Because I wasn't into letting somebody get to know me, and I thought if I went to the meetings and, you know, played the part, it would be okay, and I could do those steps on my own, and it would work. Well, I never got past 3, and when I finally got a sponsor and started working on it, I was like, I came home after doing some step work with my sponsor for the first time. I was like, wow, that was really cool. I got something out of that this time after doing steps 1, 2, and 3 probably 6 times and using treatment centers as my sponsor. And it's completely different now. And it's so neat. I asked somebody that I didn't know real well, and you know, she said to me, "Well, I know you've done the first 3 many times, but let's start over," which was wonderful for me, because not only did it give me a chance to actually work the steps with somebody, but it gave me the opportunity to get to know her and get to know. We've created a bond. And, you know, I mean, it's great. I've gone over there and, yeah, we've done step work, but we've also dyed her hair, you know. It's just it's a relationship with another woman that I've never had before. And it's inspiring. And, I don't know, it's like, I don't use her like I should. I don't call enough. But it's kind of like, my brother, when I was growing up, and still now, we don't talk a whole lot. We don't get real deep or anything, but I know if there's a time when I need somebody, I got it. And it's the same thing with my sponsor. I don't use her like I need to and like I should, but when that time comes that I'm needing somebody, I know that I've got there. And I'm working on calling more. I am. I bought a magnet this weekend to give to one of my new sponsees that says, call your sponsor, and has a number with a line. I think I'm going to keep it for me, because I need to use it. But in the past 3 weeks, I've never had a sponsee. The past 3 weeks, I've been asked twice. And so now I have 2. And I have no idea what to do. I am so very honored. I mean, you know, they asked me and I wanted to say, why? Are you crazy? You know? But at the same time, I'm like, well, gosh, you know, when I asked somebody, I looked for somebody, I saw something I wanted and something I liked, and I thought, wow, I've grown. People are seeing something in me. Now that they're seeing something in me, I don't want to fail them. You know, I want to be so good at this, and I know that's not what I need to do. I need to be the person in the meetings that they heard. I need to be me. I need to be the person that they saw something they wanted, and they want some guidance, and they want some help. I've had to humble myself a little bit, because I'm like, oh, all right, you know. I'm good now. You know. And it's not that. It's that I'm in recovery. And I think that, you know, if I were somebody else coming in, yeah, maybe I'd ask myself to be a sponsor, but I'm not good for myself. Bad for myself. Very bad. I'm excited to do this. We haven't really done much. It's funny because I keep telling the first one that asked me, I'm like, you haven't called me. You've got to call me. Well, I don't call my sponsor. You know, and it's helped me to realize that how my sponsor feels when I don't call her. It's not just for me. I'm there for her. I'm not there to be her sponsor, but I'm there for my sponsor as well. And she's told me how much she's learned from me. And that also is so cool. I'm getting the hang of the sponsee thing a little bit. After 4 years, I would think maybe it would click. I want him to call me. And it was so cool because last weekend, this woman asked me to be her sponsor, and she called me the next day. I was like, wow! I'm expecting someone to ask me to be their sponsor, and they disappear. Like I do, But she called me, and she's so eager. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to do something now. I don't know, it's just such an honor, but it's scary. I'm really scared. But I'm also very excited, and I'm so excited to learn from them. I need some freshness right now. I need to see some newcomers coming into my life. I've gotten settled in with my group, my buddies, and I need some freshness. I need some desperation. I need some, I need to be reminded of how I was when I came in. And I don't know. It's just I'm still I think about it and I'm dumbfounded because one minute I'm like, the first one that asked me, I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "I've never done this before. Are you really sure you want me?" I didn't sell myself very well, but she still wants me, and I've been on the opposite end. I know I've grown because I got into a relationship early in recovery. I'm now married. This young girl, woohoo, as of like almost 48 hours. This young girl who asked me, to be her sponsor, is in a relationship. I want her out of it. Gabby's over there laughing because she knows. But and it's like, wow. I don't know. It's such an awkward thing for me right now. I'm really good at guiding 4-year-olds, but guiding somebody who is been married and divorced and has kids, and I'm sitting here being 22 years old, seems weird to me. I don't know. I don't have much to say. I need help. I need to figure out how to do this. Huh? But I'm excited to do this. I'm so excited. I needed this. I was really focusing in on the wedding, and I was pulling away because there was all this other stuff going on in my life. And I very strongly believe that Great Spirit said, come back a little bit to your recovery, and you need to give some things and you need to take some things, and that's why I was asked. So now I'm back, but now I don't know what to do. I don't know. That's all I have. I'm confused. But that's all.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, we've already ran over, so will you guys help me close this with a group hug and the Serenity Prayer?
Roadkill meeting.